Today I'm talking to Rizwan Alibhai, who has a very long association with South London Interfaith Group. And perhaps, Rizwan, you'd like to tell us a bit about your background and how you came to join the group.
I was born in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, and I moved to England to study in 1977. And we had a family house in Sheffield, in South Yorkshire at the time. So I joined my cousins and my brothers over there who were also studying at the time. And obviously, that was the first place I landed in London, but that was the first place in England that I lived. And at that time, obviously, there wasn't such a diversity of culture and faiths as we have now. And I remember we only had one halal meat shop in Sheffield, and there always used to be a long queue at weekends for people trying to get the halal meats at that time. Actually, when I arrived, it was actually in Ramadan as well. So that was my first Ramadan. I think it was August in England at the time. So obviously, you got a lot of questions, people asking, what is Ramadan, and why you have to fast, and how can you go without food and water for so long, etc. So that was my experience. I was, I think, around 17, 18 at the time. When I came to England, I think also the winter that year was very cold. There was a lot of snow, especially around the northern England. So it was quite a difficult start to life in England. And then after, so I had some wonderful encounters, actually, even in Sheffield. What I remember, and this is so important, that there's so much goodness around us that sometimes we need to look for it. Sometimes it comes to us. And I remember where I used to go to college, College of Further Education in Stocksbridge. And obviously it was quite far away, so I couldn't come back in the afternoon to come home to do my prayer. So I needed to find, especially during the winter time, when the afternoon prayers fell around midday, and also it became dark very quickly around 3:30 or 4 o'clock. And so I spoke to a very friendly lady librarian who was herself a Christian, practicing Christian and Anglican. And I just sort of, once we were chatting, and I just explained to her the difficulty I had to find a place to pray. And she immediately offered me, she said, look, the library closes for a whole hour, and I can't see why. I'll check with my head of my section, and I can't see why you can't pray here during that time. And that was, that you can say was my first interfaith encounter in England. And made you realize that, sometimes the prejudices or stereotypes we carry, how wrong they can be. But obviously, if you're coming from a traditional Muslim background, you often sort of heard stories that people in Western countries have little or no faith, or they don't believe the same as we do. or have the same level of respect for religion as we do, which is mostly, I think, cultural misunderstanding, cultural prejudices, um, and the fact that there haven't been any personal encounters. So that was the first positive encounter I had, and a second encounter I had was, I remember, I think this was again in Sheffield. I remember I used to work. Used to do night shifts at a service station during the when I was on holiday or during my breaks, vacation time. And one such time, it fell during Ramadan, and I was doing the night shift. And obviously, the time to break the fast happened. I think at that time it was on this, quite late, and again. There was somebody I just mentioned in passing that I was doing my Ramadan fast, and then she just asked me when I was going to be there, when was my shift going to be there next time, and I just said I'll be there again at the weekend or something, and then she sent me a bowl of hot soup, chicken soup. For my breaking of the fast, and she also specified that this is halal, and so don't worry about it. And she was herself a Christian lady, but her husband was a Muslim, a Yemeni Muslim, and she says, I cook for my husband and I cook for my children. And my husband told me that it's very good to give food to anyone who is doing a fast, and to feed them. And the reward for feeding a person who is fasting is the same as the reward of having fasted oneself. And she said, well, I can't fast, I find it difficult. So I try to feed people who are fasting. And again, it was quite moving. Another very positive and faith encounter of a lovely Christian lady. So these are personal encounters that set a stage for positive interfaith relationships. And then I moved from that area. I went to study in Sunderland to do my pharmacy course there. And there, obviously, again, student life was quite actually busy. So I think most of my activities were confined to the Pakistan Society, which I was a member of. I had some friends there. I think there were Christian groups there, but I can't remember that we had many encounters at the time at university there. Yeah, I think I had more inter-Muslim encounters there, so intra-faith encounters, because obviously I was born into a Shia Muslim family. I come from a Shia Muslim background, and the majority of Muslims are from the Sunni Muslim community, and so again in Sunderland, my friends were mostly Sunni Muslims, and the local mosque was a Sunni Muslim mosque, which I used to attend for prayer. And there were some negative encounters, as there are, but there were also quite a few positive ones. And I remember one particular event that I organized, which is a bit unusual. But the local imam was very supportive. He was Sunni imam, and the secretary of the mosque was very supportive. And this was because the Shia usually organize the morning assemblies for remembering the tragedy of Karbala, the martyrdom of the Prophet's grandson in the first 2 months of the Islamic calendar. And it was my wish to organize it at the local mosque there. And this is not usually done in some Sunni mosques. I won't say all Sunni mosques, but that wouldn't be true. So anyway, it was my wish. So I asked my friends, and they actually liked the idea. And the Imam of the Sunni mosque also liked the idea, and he also enjoyed reciting some of the poetry associated with the tragedy. So, but there was some resistance as well from some more more prejudiced, I would say. I didn't think they were necessarily extremist, but they had a profound misunderstanding in terms of some anti-Shia propaganda that they had read or heard about. So they had their prejudices about the Shia, etc., and didn't actually want to know. But despite that, the mosque secretary and the imam, they supported me, and I think this is also not something very common. You find it happens now and then. They even allowed me to bring a Shia Maulana or cleric to actually give the talk on the tragedy. So imagine that you had a Shia Muslim cleric Maulana who held a majalis, we call it, and a morning assembly in a predominantly Sunni mosque. There were many. There were some who attended, some who chose not to attend. They were not happy with it, but there were good numbers who attended. So that was another. I would say that's an intra-faith encounter of how to try to build bridges. And actually, those who did attend, they actually said that it was very well organized, and they learned a lot from it, and they were happy that it was organized, So then later on, I moved to London, and for my job, and then obviously I met my wife. She's also not from a Muslim background. She was from a Christian background. So that was another interfaith encounter, and we actually we met because we were both interested in religion and discussing about religion, and of course we had many discussions. We didn't agree, and we still don't agree over many things. But obviously, love has a way to find has means to find its way. So we ended up getting married, and we've been married for a long time now. I think over 30 years. I can't remember. So yeah, so I mean, I have sort of had quite a few personal encounters and challenges which I've taken on, and so I also live in an interfaith kind of marriage. So that's an added incentive for me to try to improve interfaith relationships and the bridges. And then in the 80s and the 90s, obviously, Oh yeah, in the early 80s, obviously there was a revolution in Iran that took place, and that actually changed a lot of our thinking and the importance of encounter. We were very inspired about uh, the Islamic revolution or Iranian revolution, and the many positive steps it took forward. I think there are a lot of, for instance, encounters between the late Ayatollah Khomeini and the Pope of the time, a lot of letters of exchange. And so, again, that is a positive inspiration to engage in a positive manner. Interfaith relations. And at that time, also, there was I think there wasn't the generalized Islamophobia as we have now, but there was greater, I would say, Shia phobia at the time, particularly associated with events in Iran. So we were sort of painted in a bad light. So, I mean, what do you do when the night is so dark and there's so much misinformation and prejudice? So either you decide to stay in the dark, or you try to light a candle and maybe switch on a few lamps. So I thought the best way is to work it with other positive-minded people who are interested to explore the many things that we share in common, and people who want to build bridges between different communities. Because it's actually, this is not only one-sided, because there are unfortunately prejudices and stereotypes in both communities. There are stereotypes in Muslim communities, between Shia and Sunni Muslims, and then obviously with Christians, and again, Christians and Anglicans and Catholics, and obviously then others, other minority religions, the Jews as well, confusion between, at one time, one thought that all Jews were fervent supporters of whatever the Israeli government did and its acts of oppression against the Palestinians. So I think it was a great learning process through these encounters to see actually that there are across all the faith traditions there are people who are fervently committed to issues of justice and peace, and to working with other communities, individuals of other faiths, to make the world a better place. So I would say it's not only that that I was myself on like a mission to counter some of the Shia and Islamophobia, but also the reverse. Some of my prejudices, about the Jews or the Christians or the Hindus or other faiths. So it's a mutual process.
Yes.
And it's a learning process, and we as long as we have open hearts and open minds, then we get better every day, and we look for that which is common between us rather than that which divides us, and to strive for better community relationships. And to strive to do good wherever we can in the campaign. So we did a number of things. When I joined the South London Interfaith Group, I organized this. I proposed the alternative kind of remembrance event. Because obviously, traditionally, remembrance event only commemorates the war veterans of the First and Second World War, but doesn't say anything about the, the many innocents who die in wars today and who died in the wars there and then as well. So I think a lot of us were moved by what happened in Jerusalem when a young boy who was a 9-year-old boy tried to take shelter by his father was trying to protect him. But despite him crouching behind his father, a sniper deliberately targeted him and shot him. And I think everybody was shocked with that act of aggression, an act of terrorism, really. And sometimes it's very difficult for us as ordinary individuals, ordinary citizens, to know what we can do when such incidents happen, and what impact we are actually having. And it does feel sometimes that our little actions don't actually amount to very much, and we we feel a bit of a despair. That's all we could do. But then, if you are a person of faith, and in Islam actually puts a lot of emphasis on that, is that despair is not among the characteristics of a believer. Because if you believe in God, then you also believe in having hope of a better world, and this is amongst the promises contained within our traditions, that tomorrow's world can be better than yesterday's. And we, like the cogs of a wheel, the wheel cannot move without all the cogs doing their bits. So I thought that this is a small group of individuals, but we are a group of committed individuals that try to make a difference in the communities that we are part of, in whatever little way that we can. And the committee liked my idea, and they supported that we should do a commemoration. And so that started off, I think, some 20 odd years ago. And then ever since, we've had a remembrance event with a slightly alternative flavor than is traditionally commemorated. And we had subsequent events where we discussed issues of war and peace. And that was at the time of the First Gulf War. And the good thing was, yes, we had some heated debates, some heated arguments, heated differences of opinion, but we all felt that we could come together in prayer. And the prayer was very important. And prayer is obviously very important in Islam because it's regarded as among the main pillars of Islam. So prayer is something that we did always wanted to come together to pray for peace, to pray for justice. In some cases, we were able to do some letters, petition letters. And that was quite good as well, because, it's, I think we did one on the Palestinian tragedy, which we had the cooperation of, I think, the Jewish community, Christian community, the Muslim community, all across. So there are many positive things that we did together, and it also broke stereotypes, because often where there's a conflict, the media likes to paint it black and white.
Yes.
And put everybody in boxes. But here was a group of people from different communities, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, coming together, affirming that they were opposed to oppression, they were opposed to persecution, whoever was the cause of that, and that they stood for justice and peace. And I think that was an important affirmation. Of course, we couldn't change the trajectory of events, but I think it was important as an information. So moving on from that, then I organized. I used to like to have discussions and seminars, type of meetings, and I thought it would be useful to organize thematic seminars around issues of mutual concern or issues that affect us as a human family. So we had a series of seminars which I helped, I think I mostly with the help of Alan and others, we organized. So we had the topics we discussed were like on the environment and animal rights, animal welfare and rights. And we had speakers from across all faiths. We had the issue of religious discrimination, because at the time there was no law against discrimination on religious grounds, apart from, I think, Northern Ireland. But there was lack of awareness that actually a lot of individuals did suffer discrimination on religious grounds, especially in the Muslim community. I mean, I myself also experienced discrimination on religious grounds in a place of employment, which I was not, which went all the way to the appeal tribunal, and they actually empathize with my plight, but they state that the law only protected against direct or indirect racial discrimination, and therefore the case could not be taken forward because it was clearly an act of discrimination on grounds of religion. So we had a seminar on the religious discrimination, and subsequently then religious discrimination became outlawed. And we had also had a discussion on fundamentalism, which obviously meant different things to different religious groups. I think for that we even had somebody from the Plymouth Brethren, which are a Christian fundamentalist group. And we had another discussion on what else was there? It's quite tricky, yeah. On the Mahdi, yes, on Messianism, which is again a tradition to be found, particularly in Christianity and Islam, Abrahamic faiths, but it's also in other faith traditions as well. We had also something on Karbala as well. So yeah, quite a few seminars and discussions, and obviously there was the satanic verses that came at the time, and there were a lot of question marks about free speech and blasphemy. And I think we organized something around that, and I think that in overall terms, our seminars and narratives, and the people that the individuals involved with Southland Interfaith Group, like Brian Pierce, Iqbal Sakrani, I remember, who then became Secretary of the Muslim Council of Britain. All these individuals are very important in setting up the scene for the interfaith network, and really trying to get faith communities and faith leaders to work together on some of the issues that they can work together on, and they came out with, obviously, the interfaith network was born out of that, with the declaration that came out of that. And I think we are a long way ahead in this country in terms of interfaith relationships. Obviously, the people who are but I don't know how to categorize them. But obviously, there are people who dislike any religion. It doesn't matter what religion it is; they just hate any religion. And then, obviously, combine that, there are those who hate Islam in particular, and they obviously conflate. And it's not that they hate a particular strand of Islam, which is mostly associated with some of the extremist groups, but they hate all of Islam, and they like to lump it all in one basket, when Islam itself is actually like the Christian church. It's a broad church in quotes, and there are many differences of opinion. There are different sects, and obviously Muslims themselves will differ in their individual practice of their faith, as do Christians, as do Hindus, as do Jews, as does any other community. So, so I think that is the major challenge that we have encountered and faced. Then along come, and then I started because I also wanted to introduce my own community to people from other communities. So some of the notions that they carry in their heads can also be challenged. And I thought the Ramadan Iftar program was an ideal opportunity to have that, because when you meet in over a shared meal, over a friendly encounter, then conversations have a bit of a different tone than when the encounter is in an adversarial format, as in the media, which often media likes to have polar opposites, or in a debating chamber. The conversations often have a different tone. And sometimes also we as individuals, we might not be that interested in the heavy stuff, the theology and the differences of theology. There are plenty on both sides, within Islam, within Christianity, everywhere. But we want to actually have that experience of how that person who is from that faith actually lives their faith, and how they are attached to their own faith and how they practice it. And that's, I think that's quite, that's a very important selling point, I think, for the interfaith group. Because the interfaith group enables people to come as they are. They are not that ideal Muslim, they are not that ideal Christian or ideal Jewish, although whatever those ideals mean is obviously another debate. But individuals are welcomed as they come, of course, obviously, as long as they are they come in with the intention of a peaceful encounter and not endangering other people through violence, acts of violence, or harming them. So this I think is actually most needed in the world that we live in, because much of the information that we consume is through, well, now through the social media, through television, through the news, etc. So they make our minds for us on how we should see the other that we have rare encounters with, or if we have encounters with, is through the media, and nowadays through the social media. So I see that the value of the interfaith group, and this is its key asset, I would say, is to enable that. And then to enable from that a realization, firstly, that we actually belong to the same human family. And in a sense, we are all the children of the same God. And we all have the same fears of getting old and lonely, fears of not having any friends, anyone to care for, all the natural fears that human beings everywhere have. And we also have the same hopes. I don't think that there are many people who do not have hope for that, okay, today has been a bad day, but tomorrow will be a better day. And therefore I need to keep on working for that better day. And this sense of giving hope, this sense of giving mission, I think is particularly strong especially among Christians and Muslims. So that's quite important that we keep that mission of reviving hope and of better days alive. And in fact, from the Islamic perspective, that actually is one of the main objectives of a believer, is that he bears witness. Well, Shaheed, he bears witness that that he raised a beacon of hope and the lantern of hope in even dire circumstances, and did not give that up. So I started this interfaith iftar program, and this was well before the big iftar programs came along. Then obviously, as general Islamophobia grew, Muslim communities got better organized. They're more especially after during the Rushdie affair, I think a lot of Muslim communities suddenly woke up and they realized that actually there's a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation, and misguided opinions about us, and we really need to do something. Not only the misinformation about us from others, but also between ourselves as well. So we need to actually, as they say, what do you call it, sharpen our plowshares and get working and in the fields, as they say. So a lot of Muslim organizations started to crop up. Muslim Council of Britain, Islamic Society of Britain, and many other groups. And generally, I think local Muslim communities started to be more active in interfaith encounters because obviously realize that otherwise we are not being understood. So the Iftar program enabled that to happen, to connect with wider sections of the community. And obviously it's a lot more easier when you're a person of faith to obviously have encounters with others who also have a faith, or others who also pray, others who also worship, others who also have faith festivals. So it did make sense. Obviously, our Iftar programs are open to anyone, but initially they were open to the churches and the synagogues and the temples, the faith communities, and still mostly it's people from the faith communities who tend to attend. And as a part of that, to improve the encounter, so we thought that because in a traditional mosque setting, usually there is during the Ramadan events, there's usually prayers, there's some talks, and then some supplications in the call to prayer, and then congregational prayer, and then eating the meal together. Iftar program. So we wanted to also give visitors an encounter of the Ramadan encounter. And besides, spiritually, we are encouraged as Muslims to share the barakah. Arabic word is called barakah. Barakah means, in the most easiest term in English would be blessings. It actually means a bit more than that. It really means extending all your arms to others in this holiest of month. Because in Islamic tradition, it is said that in the month of Ramadan, God has opened all the gates of His mercy. And He has laid a feast, a banquet for the believers at the doors of His mercy. So we are very much asked to supplicate, ask for His forgiveness, and encounter God in our prayers and supplication during this month, as all the doors of mercy are open, and many sins are forgiven. Of course, the sins that you do against another person, that can only be forgiven if that person forgives. So that's what we want to try to capture, that spirit, and to share it with the wider community. So I started organizing this at the Haidari, as they agreed to host it. And over the years, it's been a very popular program, liked by both the Haidari community and people coming from outside. And I think the numbers have varied, but we've had up to, I think, one of the we had about 150, close to 180 people at one event, guests. So despite our poor marketing, the word got around, and it's become a regular feature of the interfaith scene for Ramadan. It's widely known that we have been hosting it. Obviously, things became difficult over the pandemic situation, where it was not possible, all the mosques have been closed, and it's not possible to have a physical program at the mosque. But try to, again, in the spirit of Ramadan, because a lot of Ramadan, even though what people understand and hear is that Ramadan is about abstention from food and water during the daylight hours. But actually, that is actually just a prelude. And there are traditions from the Prophet which say that there is the fasting is not just for the stomach, but there is fasting for the limbs, for all the limbs. So the fasting for the legs is not to do an oppressive act or an act of evil towards another, or not to use one's hands or one's intellect to harm or hurt others. So it is also a spiritual discipline, not to do a forbidden act or to. So it is the physical aspect is a training towards a higher level, and in that spirit, I thought it was a good idea to actually continue with the Ramadan Iftar program online on a virtual level. And last year we had our first Corona virtual interfaith Iftar, which again was quite well attended. I think we had almost 60 people there online. We shared our encounters of how it took a pandemic to bring many of us back together, to bring the world back together, as to what are our priorities as a human family, and how we are interconnected, and how we are actually helpless when faced by a virus that can't even be seen with the naked eye, and how we needed to pool our resources together as one human family throughout the world in order to counter this threat that has resulted in already loss of over 2 to 3 million lives, as well as many millions who have suffered, who have got the infection and suffered its effects. So I think this is where probably I might sort of, I mean, I could go on forever, but I might bring it to an end there. And it's past the start time now by about 10 minutes. So I would like to break my fast, and I think that this coming together is so important, and we must value that. And coming together, especially in prayer. In prayer is also is so enriching. So when I organize this program, it is actually an act of worship. The prayer does not just consist of reciting some words here and there, but it is much more profound. than that. And it involves every action we take towards that pleases our Creator. And I believe our spiritual path leads us to finally to our Creator. And what we wish most is that our Creator is pleased with us. We have a saying that the thing that pleases God most is the acts of mercy you do towards others. God says, I'm merciful, so be merciful to my creatures too. So I will end on that. And happy Ramadan.
Thank you. And happy Ramadan to you, because I think that's a wonderful encapsulation of all the things you've done. I mean, there are lots of things you haven't mentioned, but it's just fantastic what you've actually given us. I mean, it's just a wonderfully rich experience.
Yeah,
So thank you very much for that.
that's right. I wanted to make it just like the floral background behind me, which is actually just a small part of film that I took a picture of, but it's just so beautiful.
It is
It has
gorgeous.
so many different colors and different variety,
Lovely to look at.
but it's in harmony with each other. So that's what we should strive to be. Inshallah.
Thank you so much, Rizwan. Thank you.
Yeah.